Thank you for joining us for the sixth installment of the Victors, Heroes, Wolverines series. This series was created in order to connect with our Michigan family. All of you, our alumni, parents, friends, faculty, staff, and students during this pandemic. These sessions have explored the safe reopening of our campus and how best to support our students through this unprecedented time. I am thrilled that we are joined in conversation today by Vice Provost Rob Sellers and Professor Luke Shafer. We will focus on two areas. First, Michigan's approach to supporting students who have financial need, especially those who are experiencing financial challenges as a result of the pandemic. Second, in addition to serving our local student population, the university works in partnership with broader communities through U of M's Poverty Solutions Initiative, including work they did for the region, the state of Michigan, and the country. I would like to now introduce one of our hosts, Laura Rains. Laura graduated from Michigan in 2013 with a bachelor's degree in communications and informatics. While she's supported so many wonderful initiatives across campus, her passions are athletics and student life, particularly intergroup relations. A social justice education program, IGR blends theory and experiential learning to facilitate students learning about social group identity, social inequality, and intergroup relations. The program prepares students to live and work in a diverse world and educates them in making choices that advance equity, justice, and peace. Laura shared with me that her experiences with IGR proved transformational and shifted how she engages with the world around her. Laura currently resides in Chicago and is the programmatic media lead at Google. She's a volunteer on U of M's inaugural Leadership Council headed by Dr. Sellers, and passionate about engaging the next generation of donors in giving to Michigan. Laura?
Thank you, Kat. I'm so happy to be here. I'm a proud graduate of LSA's class of 2013, and I'm honored to be able to participate in talking about this topic, especially now. My time at Michigan was colored by a diverse range of experiences across campus, from athletic media relations to Greek life to my informatics and communications classes. Each activity that I participated in introduced me to people of varying racial, ethnic, and socioeconomic identities. One of the hallmarks of a Michigan education is having such a wide range of thoughts and experiences surrounding you for the first time. For many, college is the first time they meet someone from a different country or celebrate different holidays. One experience that impacted me most significantly was my time taking the intergroup dialogue class. This course pairs different dichotomous groups together to discuss their experiences. I still remember many of these discussions opening my eyes to experience I never could have imagined outside the classroom. Those conversations have influenced how I move about the world today. I've noticed that as we go through life, our vision of what can be is colored by what we have experienced and what we have seen. Until we listen or ask questions about others' experiences, it's difficult to open up that spectrum of knowledge beyond what we know. That is what Michigan has done for me and for so many others. It has opened up an avenue for me to learn about experiences I could have never imagined, to empathize with others, to want change. As my perspective was opened by those I met at Michigan, it's important to think about how we can open up that vision of what could be to those who are experiencing poverty. As I was entering college in the midst of the 2008 economic crisis, many of my classmates were worried that they would be unable to afford the Michigan education and take on the debt obligation that college was going to entail. I imagine all of the potential Michigan students who were not able to make the decision to attend U of M because of the financial burden they would face. My college experience would not have been as rich without the presence of friends who would not have been able to be at Michigan without scholarship support. I personally donate in hopes that future Michigan students will continue to experience a diverse college experience and expand their frame of reference and bringing those experiences into the working world and influencing those around them. The financial support that donors can provide is essential in maintaining the diversity of thought and opinion that makes it Michigan education unique. The COVID pandemic is impacting people of all socioeconomic backgrounds, but especially those who have to continue to work outside the home. Those whose jobs are at risk based on whether certain businesses will continue to operate. The people who put their lives at risk to help provide for others. We cannot risk missing a wave of students who, in joining the Michigan community, could help broaden all of our perspectives. As a recent graduate, I've learned that gifts of every size impact the student experience. $1,000 can allow a student to work 100 fewer work study hours, to allow them to spend that time having conversations with their friends, living a student life they perhaps could not have imagined before. And now, I am delighted to introduce Dr. Rob Sellers, who will help highlight the importance of the student support to maintain a diverse and equitable experience for all Michigan students. Dr. Sellers is Vice Provost for Equity and Inclusion, Chief Diversity Officer, and Charles D. Moody Collegiate Professor of Psychology and Education. A native of Cincinnati, Dr. Sellers attended Howard University and earned his PhD at the University of Michigan, taught at the University of Virginia, and ultimately returned to the University of Michigan, where he served as chair of the Department of Psychology before entering his role in 2014. Dr. Sellers has been recognized nationwide for his research and teaching on the role of race in the psychological lives of African Americans. In his administrative role, Dr. Sellers leads the university's efforts to create a diverse University of Michigan where all can thrive and excel. It's a complex challenge, and we are fortunate to have Dr. Sellers leading the way for the University of Michigan community. Dr. Sellers, welcome.
Thank you very much, Laura. I really appreciate that wonderful introduction, and you're clearly an example of what we hope to do here at the University of Michigan, to produce difference makers, change makers, people who care deeply about their institution, their world around them, and are committed to making a difference. I want to say welcome to all of you out there participating in this webinar, and thank you for spending your time. As you know, COVID is having a major impact in all of our lives. It is having a tremendous strain on our entire society, but that strain is particularly difficult for our most vulnerable in our society. And the same thing happens here at the University of Michigan. Our students who have traditionally been underrepresented, who come from the same backgrounds that the rest of our society sees in terms of disproportionate lack of resources, disproportionate stress in their communities, are feeling those same burdens, those same needs here at the University of Michigan. And those students are also extremely important to who we are and what we want to be as a university. They're part of what makes the university great. And so as part of our efforts as an institution to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to get the high quality first-class education that the University of Michigan is known for, we as an administration and as a university has been working very hard these past 6 months to address the differential needs that we're likely to see with respect to students. In fact, it is likely that we will spend as much as $30 million in the upcoming year to address additional need for our students. And much of those funds will go to increased financial aid. As a society has been impacted financially in terms of jobs and other financial hardships that we're feeling as a nation, this has also impacted our students' need with respect to financial aid. And so we are dedicating a significant amount of our budget, or increasing our budget as it relates to financial aid. We also recognize that there will be a number of emergency aid needs that haven't or have traditionally not been things that we've experienced in the past. And we want to make sure that we can meet those needs as students come upon them. We're also spending significant increases in our support around counseling and psychological services, addressing issues with regards to housing, food assistance, spending a great deal of time, effort to make sure that everybody is as safe as possible on campus. So we've been doing a lot of retrofitting on the campus, including adding tents, reconfiguring our classrooms, trying to increase our capacities with regards to Wi-Fi and other online resources. I just want to mention in the time that we have today, just a couple of spaces and a couple of situations and opportunities to help us support all of our students. One area that oftentimes we don't think about when we think of University of Michigan is the issue of food insecurity. One of our recent studies indicates that as many as 30% of our students suffer from food insecurity, and 10% of them go without food for an entire day. As you can imagine, being in a situation where you're food insecure, it will have a great negative impact in one's ability to sleep, one's ability to focus, one's ability to engage with other students, and ultimately one's ability to graduate and attain the educational and academic standards and potential that one has. At the U of M, we have the Maize and Blue Cupboard, whose mission is to provide a solution, a local solution, to this nationwide challenge, including extending its hours to serve those in the U of M community who are now affected by the pandemic. The Maize and Blue Cupboard serves over 1,000 shoppers a week. The cupboard offers free groceries, household and personal items, as well as provides cooking classes, counseling services, and other programs to ensure that U of M students, faculty, and staff who are food insecure receive equitable access to nutritious food and other valuable resources to eat. In fact, this past July, we had 91 volunteers who worked to support the Maize and Blue Cupboard and had over 1,480 shoppers who visited just in July. Another area of challenge that you may not think of is student mental health and wellness. We know that COVID has resulted in a severe shortage of mental health services in the broader community. And we're expecting the need to ramp up our student mental health services and wellness services in the upcoming year. It's already been a rising trend within higher education, and we know that there's going to be a skyrocketed trend in this upcoming year. So our CAPS, our Counseling and Psychological Services Unit, continues to offer services online to meet and address the unique situation that the COVID pandemic is presenting us with. These online services will have the ability to provide individual counseling services, including crisis or urgent support. They will also facilitate workshops and broader presentations. The pilot program that CAPS is launching, that launched over the summer to test our online scheduling for an initial consultation, really reduced the need for students to come in physically to our counseling center, and gives us great confidence that we will be able to ramp that up in the upcoming fall. Since transitioning to a virtual strategy in mid-March, CAPS has conducted over 4,500 telecounseling sessions. In addition to CAPS, we've also piloted a couple of really important app-based support resources to not only address mental health needs, but also to build greater resilience within our community. For example, our Silver Cloud work provides a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week free service to our U of M students, faculty, and staff. It's an online, self-guided, interactive mental health resource. It provides cognitive behavioral interventions for common mental health issues. In addition, we have our U of M CAT Stress Buster app, and this is a donor-funded app that provides students with up-to-date student mental health information, resources, as well as providing them with stress reduction exercises and other activities. This is particularly important for our, again, communities that have traditionally been underrepresented. For instance, our African American students have been estimated to be more than 5 times as likely as white students to have someone close to them die as a result of COVID. So we know that one of the challenges that we will face will be grief counseling and an increase in grief counseling in dealing with and providing those types of services. COVID has also impacted not only what happens to our students on campus, but many of our important outreach programs. And we've been working hard to pivot to adjust there. One of them being our Wolverine Pathways program, which is a program that is a partnership within Detroit, Southfield, and Ypsilanti, and provides students from the 7th through 12th grade with supplemental education opportunities. Those students who complete the program and apply to the University of Michigan end up with a guaranteed 4-year scholarship, as well as support for any other need-based efforts. This year, we are moving to virtual online services for the program, including virtual instruction, one-on-one mentoring, as well as e-coaching. In many ways, we're attempting to pivot and to learn from this experience. And if the experience goes well, this will allow us to actually expand the scope of the program to other places. So having an effective online virtual application will allow us to expand into other districts and other communities. In addition to the Wolverine Pathways program, there are a myriad of other efforts and programs where we're attempting to address all of our students to make sure that they all have an equitable opportunity to be successful here at the university. In doing so, the provost has established a COVID-19 student support fund to meet the highest priority needs. I strongly encourage you to check out that fund if this is an area that is of interest to you. It will address issues of financial aid as well as emergency support. In addition, there are also a number of programs that are located within the schools and colleges that are attempting to meet these increased needs in the upcoming years. And if you prefer, or you already have a relationship with one of our schools and colleges, I strongly urge you to connect with them as well and look at opportunities to support those needs. As you can imagine, COVID is not only affecting us, but it's affecting our larger society. And I'm gonna, at this time, stop here and provide an opportunity for Luke Shafer to address some of those larger societal needs that we are attempting to meet here at the University of Michigan.
Thank you so much, Rob. I am thrilled to introduce Luke Shafer. Luke is the Herman and Amelia Cohn Professor of Social Justice and Social Policy and Associate Dean for Research and Policy Engagement at the Gerald R. Ford School of Public Policy. At U of M, he is also the Professor of Social Work and the inaugural Director of Poverty Solutions, which is an interdisciplinary presidential initiative that partners with communities and policymakers to find new ways to prevent and alleviate poverty. Through his role at Poverty Solutions, Luke acts as a special counselor on anti-poverty policy to the director of the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. His work has been cited in media outlets such as the New York Times, Washington Post, The Economist, and The Atlantic, and he has been featured on such programs as Marketplace and CNBC's Nightly Business Report. He was recently awarded the prestigious Andrew Carnegie Fellowship. Michigan has had tremendous impact on local, state, and federal policies shaped in large part by our Poverty Solutions Initiative. As Rob shared, Luke, we are eager to hear more.
Thank you. It's great to be with everyone, and I personally really appreciated getting to hear Vice Provost Sellers talk about all the incredible things that the university is doing to try to support students and campus. So I appreciate that. Poverty Solutions is a university-wide initiative. We get our charge from President Schlissel to move beyond basic research. It's moving beyond questions of the causes and consequences of poverty to really partner with communities to find new ways to prevent and ameliorate it. So our goal is really to be out in the community, making change in the world using evidence and working in partnership. One role that we play is trying to be a forum for big ideas and big conversations. So I wanted to invite you, there's a special opportunity this fall. We usually have a speaker series that meets in person, but this fall, of course, we're gonna be meeting virtually. And I couldn't be more excited about our lineup. We have events with Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot, proud U of M alum, Lieutenant Governor of Michigan, Garland Gilchrist, who also has a U of M connection, and New York Times columnist Nicholas Kristof, among a number of others. And as my staff knows, I really like to, I always say, break the fire code with rooms. I like big attendees. So I hope some of you will join us. And I put in the chat our website, poverty.umich.edu, so you can find out about that. And here's some people talking about what they're doing. So Poverty Solutions, as I said, is mostly about action. And we really believe that universities, we have great assets that we can bring to the table. We know research, we know analysis. We've got incredible students who are passionate and really like to find out what research says and figure out what are the best ways to tackle problems. But we also don't have all the answers. Clearly, with issues like poverty, we don't have all the answers. So we believe it's incredibly important to work in partnership. We have national reach, but we also have a lot of presence, both in the city of Detroit, where we have a partnership on economic mobility with Mayor Duggan and his team, where we work at City Hall. I have 4 staff members who are actually embedded in City Hall. One of them actually supported by U of M alum donors who work on strategic issues related to enhancing mobility in the nation's poorest large city and in the state of Michigan. So as Kat mentioned, I serve as a special counselor to the director of the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services that oversees all health programs for the state as well as economic security. It accounts for about half of the state budget and touches the lives of over 2 million Michiganders every year. So I work to advise on research and evidence on some of those programs. As you can imagine, COVID has been a perfect storm. Usually when we have a recession, we have a lot more run up in time, right? That we start to be able to see it and we see employment losses gather on. And even in a bad recession, there's sort of time to make some changes. Of course, that wasn't the case in COVID. And it really just all came on at once. And you saw these massive job loss like we haven't ever seen in half a century plus, right? And usually when you have a recession, jobs might fall back and people would lose those wages, but they could count on schools. But of course, schools closed down too, right? So you had families who were both losing the income from work, or maybe their jobs were continuing, but their children weren't going to school. I can tell you as a parent, I know these have been incredibly stressful times, and I didn't have to worry about paying the rent in the next month. And of course, if you don't have schools and you don't have the labor market, there are social service agencies and places where you can go to get help. And of course, all of those places were scrambling too, right? Where trying to figure out how they were going to deliver services during a public health crisis like this, and just scrambling to meet the needs. So it has just been like nothing that we have ever experienced. At the same time, we've actually seen some incredible innovations in the way that we try to address economic hardship in this country. So the response for unemployment insurance that some of you may have watched that extended access to that program and increased the benefits, we've never done anything like that in the history of the country. And the economic incentive payment that was available to virtually all Americans, we've never had something that was so comprehensive as that. And so there were some innovations that made a big difference as well. So where do we fit into all of this? One thing is that early on, we thought it was important to be a national leader and trying to raise the issues, right? As Congress started to debate about how they were going to respond, as social service agencies were trying to figure out what to do, schools, companies, we wanted to say that in economic crises like that, those who are most vulnerable are often the ones that are most at risk, right? So we've tried to be sort of a public voice, raising these issues from the start to finish, raising it when we think that there are major issues like we've never seen before, and also when there were some successes. And since the onset of COVID, Poverty Solutions, my team, as well as our faculty experts, have been cited in more than 620 media outlets, including the New York Times, Marketplace, The Atlantic, USA Today, the Detroit Free Press, and many more. So we try to be national as well as having a presence in Michigan. But we also wanted to be about the action. In the city of Detroit, we had our team at City Hall, and we were able to embed in some of those big issues. I have a team member who works for me, but is the Digital Inclusion Fellow for the City of Detroit, a place where there's significant sort of inequity in who has access to the internet, who has computer devices. And so he serves now as the Digital Inclusion Director for the city, and we were working on this well before COVID hit. But of course, again, COVID exacerbates those inequalities. And so he was a major part of championing an effort, a successful effort in the city to get laptops for all Detroit public school, community school district students. So that's 50,000 students, and it's laptops as well as internet access, right? Those are the two most important things. And that rollout started in July and has been going throughout. Of course, when you learn, right, when you do sort of this type of policy, you learn that the ideas are important, the money is important, but there's also a massive execution, right? So getting to be a part of this effort that both brought these resources to bear and successfully got those resources and distributed it, and what it means to try to distribute it to 50,000 kids has been an incredible experience for us. We also had a fellow who was working in the housing department and worked particularly on questions about homelessness encampment. So this is it's a question, right? When a public health crisis hits, what do you do with homelessness encampments? Folks who are living on the street, right, or congregating as a group. And the rules, sort of best practices, change a little bit. And so she was able to author, using evidence-based, she scanned the environment across all states and was able to author the city's homelessness encampment policy to say exactly how that should be dealt with. At the state, in my role, in the team that I oversee at the state, of course, we have a series of economic security programs, and a lot of the goals were to say, what can we stop doing, right, to allow families to survive without having to adhere to the shelter-in-place order? Maybe we'll stop requiring people to have interviews and come into an office, right? That's an obvious one. But every single one of those things takes a lot of work. Another thing is bringing down federal benefits. So in the two federal laws that were passed, there were provisions for added food assistance. One was allowing us to just increase everyone who is receiving food assistance through a program called the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, it's a snappy acronym, to just increase their benefits a bit. The second one was actually targeted to families with school-age kids, right? Recognizing that lots and lots of kids, actually about half of kids in public schools, access free and reduced price lunch, and knowing that that support in this perfect storm of COVID had disappeared. Of course, that ends up, right? So we received approval from the federal government to provide added food assistance benefits to everyone who receives free and reduced price lunch. Of course, that means two hulking bureaucracies have to talk to each other. They have to do a data merge, right? We have to make sure we're paying attention to federal policies. We have to make sure, you know, everyone who should get a card gets one, and that we're not sending tons of cards to the same person. And it just ends up being like a huge orchestration. And I'll forever be proud that the state of Michigan became the very first state to get through the process of getting approval for that, get the state government to come together and get those benefits out to almost 1 million kids. And so because we've been doing it the longest, that means from that early action, which was driven by the state, but in part in partnership with a place like U of M sort of working to try to understand what's going on, providing that added capacity, we're talking about $750 million added dollars in food assistance in the state. So I'm waiting till we crest over $1 billion, right, to roughly, I think, 1.5 million families during this hard time. That makes a big difference. I'll just mention 2 other programs real quick. Energy assistance, that's another issue, right? So families are staying at home, they've lost their jobs. We want to make sure that their utilities aren't being shut off at this time. And this is another one where working with the state government and then working with the utility providers, we were able to work in partnership, I think, to do something innovative that no other state is doing. So the state of Michigan, and I headed this up in partnership with incredible folks at the state, did a direct file transfer with the major utility providers in Michigan, DTE, Consumers Energy, and Simco. And we were able to match the files of people who were at risk of shutoff as the shutoff moratorium started to lapse to our own files of folks who were receiving public assistance. So we would know they were eligible, and we were able to make direct payments on those files, right, with added federal funds that came through. But because this was, in a way, sort of guaranteed money from the providers, we asked them to work in partnership with us and forgive 25% of the arrearage. So if somebody came and they had a $1,000, well, we'll say $100 arrearage on their utilities, the state would pay 75%, and the utilities would forgive the other $25. And that person would get a clean slate, right? During a difficult time, it was just one fewer things that they had to worry about. And we took 41,000 families through that process. And the state spent $15 million on that. And the utility providers forgave about $4 to $5 million. And we saw that during that time, the risk of shutoff was actually lower during this period than it was in previous years. We tried to bring some of that over to the eviction prevention program. So the eviction moratorium went into place, but people's rents were still accruing during that time. And the state of Michigan had a moratorium for about as long as most states had it. And when it came off, we were able to be a part of creating an evidence-based program to try to help families who were behind on their rent. It's a $50 million program. And again, we asked landlords, right, who are also struggling during this time, right? Landlords often have mortgages to pay, to be a part of that too. And in that case, we asked them to forgive 10% of past rents and all fines and late fees. So that program's been starting to go on. We also knew from research that we'd supported that making sure that tenants have legal representation was a critical piece. So that has been worked into this program. And MISHDA is another state agency that's been working on that. And the state of Supreme Court has been a part of that as well. And we've seen, ever since the eviction moratorium lapsed in the city of Detroit, there hasn't been a single eviction in the city of Detroit. And I think that's an incredible, while we worry about what happens in the future, that's an incredible thing to be able to say. Just the final program I wanted to talk about very quickly was that economic incentive payment. So some of you may remember that, right? $1,200 for all adults up to a certain income, and $500 per child. And it was more broadly available than any type of program like this one we've ever done before, but it was confusing, right? And making sure that families who were eligible to this, who thought they might not be, knew about it, we worked with a human-centered design firm to create an economic stimulus website. This was just one to try to identify what the biggest questions were that people had and answer them, right? And make sure that they could get that economic incentive payment. So with that program, with that website, we launched that in May as those economic incentives were coming down the pike. And we were kind of stunned actually by the interest. So we ended up being on local news all over the state of Michigan. And over the course of the last 4 months, we've had 200,000 people come through the website. And this is just one of those examples, I think, where bringing evidence, sort of understanding problems, trying to figure out how do we make sure families get this support that they're entitled to during a time. It's just something that the university can bring to bear, but it's something we can do in partnership, right? With a human-centered design firm that knows how to communicate things. Because if you look at the website that I just put in the chat, it's just not the way me as a nerdy professor probably would have communicated that material, right? It's the material that I knew people needed because I'm the policy wonk who could look through, but it's just done in a different way. And I'll just be always grateful to our external partner, Sevilla, for being a part of making it something that 200,000 people have thought, I'm gonna check this out because I think it can help me. So I'm gonna close there and just say that this is a university initiative. It's supported by the university. We got our charge from President Mark Schlissel, and it's supported by donors. And I'm just so grateful to the university for supporting the work that we do, and to donors for being a part of that. So thank you.
Great. We are going to open it up for Q&A with Rob and Luke. So I encourage all of you who are attending today to please put your questions into the Q&A. We may not be able to answer all of them, but we'll try to get to at least a few. So Rob, I want to start with you. Luke really talked about a lot of the financial support that's been provided, not only at the state level, but also nationally. So I think one of the questions that we're hearing is, was Michigan able to provide additional financial support for students who may have greater need this year? What are you seeing discussed at, in the level that you're at right now?
So, Kat, thanks. We have, through the support of our of donors, as well as through efforts to manage that support, have been able to address the increased need for students. So we had to include a COVID fee this year, a small nominal one, but we were committed to making sure that as the students' need increased, that we continued our commitment to making sure that we've met the need for every single university of every single student in the state of Michigan, as well as meet the documented need for as many out-of-state students as we possibly could. And it's a tremendous burden, but we're able to do it because of the support of our donors. Right now, we actually have 2 out of 3 of our undergraduate students actually receive financial aid here at the University of Michigan. We've last year had over $635 million of scholarships and fellowships awarded to students. That number is definitely increasing. We don't know what the total amount is, but we are meeting that need. And just another statistic to throw out at you is 1 out of every 4 in-state undergraduates pays absolutely no tuition due to their financial need.
Great. Well, thank you. So I was really just in awe, Luke, as an alum of the Ford School and someone who works there, of the amazing opportunities that our students are having access to create influence and really apply what they're learning in the classroom. And so I know when I taught over this summer, many of my students who were part of our internship program shared that their friends across the country who were Michigan students had lost their internships. So I'm wondering, this is a question actually for both of you, are we still providing work-study positions, fellowships, these types of opportunities to current undergrad and graduate students and professional students? And how do you think that's going to help them as they navigate a world post-graduation that is affected by COVID-19?
Well, I can say,
we'll start.
I can say at Poverty Solutions, and I think that this was in part sort of driven by university policy, where, of course, the university was hit financially very hard by the crisis. And there's been a number of measures sort of put in place to sort of protect on that. But student student employment was never a part of that. In fact, so from our point, we took on many, many more students over the summer for paid work and paid internships than we ever had before for two counts, right? One, because there were fewer other opportunities, and two, to provide the income support. And I will say, I think, from our standpoint, we had built relationships with everything that I just mentioned, right? In the city of Detroit and at the state of Michigan, all this work that we've done. It wasn't something that when COVID hit, we just showed up at City Hall and said, oh, we think we should help now, right? Or showed up at the state governments. That we've been building those for a long time, and that's what it takes. And that's where, our students really become incredible resources on that. So just to give you one example, in the city of Detroit, one of the things that we've been working on is tax foreclosure, right? That's a big reason why people lose their homes. It's a longer term crisis than COVID, but it is also connected to some of the inequities that lead to higher rates of COVID, right? Where we actually have quite a bit of housing instability in the city. We've been a part of a number of initiatives to actually try to change the trend. Detroit a couple of years ago was majority owner and has become majority renter because of this sort of ecosystem that's, I think, not working like it should. So we've been a part of trying to change policies for that, to revert to more home ownership in the city of Detroit. But of course, a lot of the homes that are available are in challenged condition, right? So there's a lot of repair needs. So that takes us down the ecosystem. Well, we had a great student, a set of students led by one, that did this incredible report on home repair. It's the home repair guide for the city of Detroit. And it just identifies every source of support in the city that somebody can go to get help, right? Getting their roof repaired, getting a new furnace. And, when I saw this thing, I almost didn't want to put it up on our website because I worry about having to continue to update them, right, as time goes on. It has been our number one. If we had a publication, bestseller, it would be our number one bestseller. This thing, it just went like hotcakes, right? We were printing copies. We printed hundreds of copies. The land bank wanted them, City Hall wanted them, and it just met a need, right? And we never would have been able to not be able to do it without Ryan and her team. So, we try to provide opportunities for students. I think they're enriched by those, right? It can be a fundamental part of their education. And also when it's done well, it can have a meaningful impact on society.
And I just want to briefly echo Luke's point. The university, like everybody, is suffering significant financial challenges. So not only do we have increased costs in terms of delivering the type of education that we want to deliver, but we're also expecting significant cuts in terms of funding from the state. As you might imagine, the state, like every place else, is hurting. But one thing that Mark Slissel has committed to, and the rest of the leadership, is to make sure that we maximize our students' educational experiences. So while we've had hiring freezes and salary freezes, and even at the executive level cuts in salary, student-facing activities have been increased in terms of financial aid, making sure that they're prioritized and immune with regards to the cuts. So I anticipate that more students will have more opportunities, paid opportunities, working with the university, as opposed to less, as a function of that being one area that will be immune from cuts. Also, our staff and our faculty have been working really hard to make sure that the experiences, both inside the classroom as well as outside the classroom, really are transferable across a virtual environment. So we're seeing virtual internships, working with our external partners. In my office in particular, we've hired more students to help us in terms of our various outreach efforts and our thinking with regards to how we best support students, utilizing their efforts and knowledge as mentors to other students, for example, in our Success Connects program. So we're deeply committed to making sure that as we go through these challenging times, our students are as insulated as they possibly can and that they get the very, very best University of Michigan educational experience as possible.
Great. Thank you both. Luke, we have a couple of questions for you. I'm just going to combine them into like a bigger question, which I have no doubt you'll be able to answer. So one question is, how does Poverty Solutions and or U of M initiatives coincide with other efforts, for instance, Quicken Community Fund's effort with tax foreclosure or WSU's free tuition for Detroit residents? And then beyond that, there's such amazing work happening that you're doing in the city of Detroit and the state of Michigan. Is that having an impact on other state policy around the country?
Yeah, great question. So the first one is that we try to do everything in partnership, right? I think one of the places that where often things go wrong is trying to reinvent the wheel. And so our goal is always to be in partnership. So we've done grants across the entire university. So there's partnerships within the university, right? So I think we've done, we provided grants to faculty, I think in every single school and college, all 19 schools and colleges now, including the School of Engineering, doing work on affordable transportation and clean water, the law school on fines and fees, right? And how people get caught up in that, the School of Social Work, School of Nursing, the medical school. And that is also meant to be outside, right? So mentioned Quicken Loans. They're actually one of our very closest partners in the city of Detroit. They provided a grant. I mentioned the Homelessness Encampment policy. That person's salary is paid by a grant by Quicken Loans. And then this tax foreclosure issue is something that we've been working extremely closely with them on, right? So it's a program called Make It Home. And one of the things I'm very proud of is early on, we had started up and we had faculty that had a connection with the United Community Housing Coalition, an incredibly important group of lawyers who represent people who are facing tax foreclosure and other stuff. And that was, they had been doing that work, and Quicken Loans was also doing this work, the community development. And we actually became sort of a facilitator of a meeting between those two groups. The first meeting sort of about these issues together, and they've gone on to do incredible things together, right? So I think the University of Michigan in that role of facilitator, right? In that role as someone who has both connections to a community group like UCHC and Quicken Loans can be a facilitator that can help bring those partnerships together. Incredibly important. So then your second question, right? About impact across the nation, right? So we believe that doing work together, doing work sort of with a presence in the city of Detroit and at the state is a way that we can find evidence-based strategies, right, to do the work. One of the ways that we hope to have an impact is changing the way academics do their work, right? So we've formed what's called the Midwest Mobility from Poverty Network. It's academic research centers across the Midwest. And it was actually from a grant where the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation approached us about the work to say, let's try to export some of this model, right? This deeply engaged sort of action-oriented model across the country and see what we do. And of course, we've been learning from those centers across the Midwest at the University of Chicago, at Case Western, at the University of Wisconsin, while also sort of being a part of thinking like, how can we re-envision the work that we do in poverty scholarship to really matter for people and families. And then finally, you know, we do a lot of work at the national level. So a lot of my work, for example, has been around a policy proposal for a child allowance. So this is a way that virtually all Western industrialized countries support families with kids. Canada implemented a child allowance a number of years ago and actually cut child poverty by 30%. And so my own work in scholarship on seeing what would the impacts of such a policy be and sort of analyzing that has sort of been a part of a broader discussion of it. And a child allowance bill actually passed the House of Representatives for the first time in history in the last few months. And so again, right, it's all about sort of playing the role, right, and figuring out what is it that we can do, working with anyone and everyone to forward solutions and try to make things better for families.
Great, thank you. I think we have time for one last question, and I'll direct that to Rob. I'm also going to do kind of a super question for you as well. So one is you highlighted some of the amazing work that's being done in a virtual environment as we've tried to adapt. So thinking specifically about mental health. So there are a couple of questions around, are some of those programs going to continue post-COVID? And then also people wanted to know if, for instance, like the Maize and Boo cupboard, which people didn't know existed, are there ways that they can support that, whether through food or monetarily, which I think would be a lot of our programs that are coming into play. So those are a couple of the questions that came in.
So with regards to the first question, we are in general trying to address COVID in such a way that we not only address our immediate needs and adapt what we're currently doing, but to see whether or not these adaptations will actually allow us to be even more effective in a post-COVID environment. So one of the areas that is particularly exciting is that we're seeing that we can utilize remote access to increase our capacity with respect to one-on-one coaching and one-on-one connections with our students. So with respect to our Success Connects program, which is a program that sort of serves as a front porch to new students across the campus, especially our first generation students, but any student that shows up at the University of Michigan as an undergraduate in their first year and not really having a map on how to navigate the university. Well, Success Connects is designed to provide that one-on-one coaching, to be a place where someone checks in regularly throughout the year just to make sure that you're doing well, connects you to leadership programs, connects you to tutoring opportunities, et cetera. So we see that the remote environment will provide us to expand that capacity. I mentioned earlier in Wolverine Pathways, it's providing us with opportunities to expand that capacity to other school districts. We've primarily been in 3 districts because of the physical location challenges of expanding beyond. If we are successful, we will continue to do so. So our mindset is, yes, we want to overcome COVID, but we also want to use this as an opportunity to expand our capabilities. And the reality is, even though the technology had been here before, it has been very difficult to get folks to move forward. So we want to win the future. We want to utilize our experiences now to help us create a future where everybody has as many different opportunities as possible. And with respect to the Maize and Blue cupboard, there are opportunities to contribute, whether it's food, volunteering time, always opportunities to provide funding. We welcome whatever you're able to do.
Great. Thank you. Are there any, before I close, are there any final comments that either of you just want to share or any thoughts that you didn't have the opportunity to share today? I always like to ask that question.
So one thing, and I'll turn it over to Luke afterwards and shut up. So, Poverty Solutions is a great example of what makes a university special. This is a program that is based on one of the core values of the university, which is world-class scholarship, that is evidence-based in its approach, taking that world-class scholarship and then addressing real life, really important, life-changing issues, and doing so again in a way that continually is evidence-based, that continues to lead to even greater scholarship and better work. That's just one of a number of different programs. Another one that I would throw out there is the HAIL Scholars Program, which was a program based on scholarship here at the University of Michigan, as well as out there in larger academia, to provide educational opportunities that weren't being provided to our most talented students with least financial resources throughout the state.
Thank you. Luke?
Yeah, and I would just say, Rob mentioned the HAIL Scholarship. I think is a great example of, you see it all through his presentation today, I think of a thoughtful approach to everything we can do, small, medium, and large, to enhance the experience for students on campus. And the HAIL Scholarship suggested we needed to communicate with students who could get into Michigan but thought that they couldn't afford it. And we needed to do that communication differently. And so my colleague Sue Donarski worked with financial aid to do an experiment where we just randomly had some students get a different set of communication that basically looked like a coupon for free tuition. It wasn't a change in policy, it was a change in the way we talked. And that had huge demonstrable effects for kids who had the grades, had the test scores to get into Michigan, but just said, you know what, my family can't afford it. And so I'm not gonna come. And I remember being that kid myself, and there wasn't a HAIL scholarship at the time. And you know, if I didn't have some people in my life that said apply to Michigan, you know, I wouldn't have. In that case, I went to another school, but that, you know, the HAIL scholarship's meaningful to me. And then it was turned into the Go Blue guarantee, right? Which makes that policy universal. So, you know, one of the reasons I love working here and is just, you know, everything you can see about the way Rob talks about student services and really trying to use evidence to continue to improve, you know, day in and day out.
Thank you. This entire program has so deeply resonated with me. I grew up on the border with Mexico in the Rio Grande Valley, which is one of the hardest hit by COVID-19. It's one of the poorest mid-sized cities and areas in the country. And so to hear how we're making an education accessible, how we're providing policy solutions that have an impact in such a powerful way across the country that are affecting, you know, especially the intersectionality with communities of color, which where I come from is predominantly Latino. It's just really demonstrates to me that we're all working together to try to create better solutions. So thank you for spending your time, and thank you for all of you who attended today. You know, through your support in so many different ways, we've been able to make this possible. So thank you.